Please open your Bible, if you would, to Exodus 26. We are working through the different situations when it comes to the tabernacle. And I want you to look at this verse with me, 1 Corinthians 14:40. 1 Corinthians 14:40. But all things should be done decently and in order. Have you ever heard somebody quote that? A lot of times it's quoted at a business meeting when we want just that. We want to have order. We want to have a situation where we're not arguing with one another. We're not bickering. There's not gossip. And then when something is put together, this is probably the favorite verse of Robert, who wrote Robert's Rules of Order, which sometimes people quote more. I haven't noticed that at our church, but there are people that seem to quote that more than the Bible sometimes at business meetings. But we're blessed at this church. We don't have that kind of situation. But there is a beauty to order, and there's a beauty to watching how older people view things. And I think the reason that I'm thinking that way is because I'm getting older. I mean, it benefits me to tell you that. And this song, I've been using 70s titles, the number one hits throughout the 70s of my messages. And so I'm listening to this song, Heart of Gold. I don't know if you've ever heard it, by Neil Young. But he says, I've been searching for a heart of gold. And then he says this right afterward, and I'm getting old. And I thought, that's very appropriate for me right now, as I think about as I get older. And some of the things that intrigue me as I get older is how much I sound like my dad or I sound like my mom. And I'll say these lines or these phrases or use these words that nobody else seems to use. And it's kind of endearing sometimes. My wife, when things get interesting, she'll say this, "Good governor." I don't know if you've ever heard anybody say "good governor," but I just look at her and go, "We're from Illinois. What is that?" No. But as I'm... Sorry, it was right there on the T. But I want to read to you some phrases from old people, okay? And so if you say them, you would go, "Oh, I guess I'm old." Yeah. But listen to this. And my mom uses these, and every now and then I'll use it because certain phrases fit really well. And even if you don't know what they mean, something happens, they say this phrase, and it just fits. It just works, okay? You ever hear somebody say, "Well, that's for the birds"? Haven't got the foggiest. That's used in the old bean. You're looking very smart. I remember when I would come out and I was finally wearing something nice for church or for my class pictures at school. My mom would go, "You just look very smart today." And I was like, "So other days?" He or she cleans up well. Darn tootin'. This is something that my father-in-law would say, "Mark my words." And you're always like, whoa, when he says that, the next phrase is going to be something that I better take notice of. He was a man of few words, but when he would say, "Mark my words," it was almost like E.F. Hutton. We'd all just shut up. What's he going to say now? Well, that's a fine kettle of fish. This is my mom loves this one. Honest to Pete. Pete who? The bee's knees. It's almost like a musical. I want to just, that's the bee's knees? Yeah. The cat's pajamas. Yeah. The cat's meow. And if you don't know these, if you're like, "What's he talking about? The cats with the pajamas?" Look it up. Google. Right. Cockamamie. You with your cockamamie schemes. Cockamamie. Think about cockamamie. Hello. Boulder Dash. I know that's I should be wearing a monocle at this point. That's Boulder Dash. I don't know. I'm just thoroughly interested. Or when I would get upset about something and my dad would go, "Oh, you're going to have a conniption fit." There is a word. You look it up. It's a certain kind of fit. All right. But when you're, by the way, when somebody says, "Oh, you're going to have a conniption fit," right then you don't want to hear it. because you're having a conniption fit. You're angry. Well, as we're working through this, some phrases came to my mind, and we could get bogged down, if we're not careful, we could get bogged down in the technicality of the tabernacle. I Googled blueprints for the tabernacle, and bunches of different things come up concerning that, and I will throw onto the Facebook page, but also I'll send out an email of a page that explains these things in detail. We've got a little model here that shows the different aspects of the tabernacle as we've been working through them. And so we've got this tent situation that God said to Moses, this is what I want built for worship. And if you and I were to walk past it, there wouldn't be much to grab our attention except for the fact that in the midst of a wilderness, there's this thing that's been put together that is a bigger tent than it seems that the other tents are in the situation. But it wouldn't necessarily catch our eye except for the fact that there's some business or things going on around it and people going in that you're like, well, they're wearing certain things. But if you were to look at the outside, a lot of it was just weather resistant. It could have looked gnarled at times. It was goat skins and porpoise skins, something sea manatee, all these different things that they would use to be durable, but inside were these holy items that were worth millions of dollars. Remember when they had left Egypt and how God said to them, you ask your Egyptian neighbors and they'll give you their jewelry, they'll give you the gold. It's like, get out of here. We're so sick of what these plagues, what's going on. So they gave them all that stuff. And ultimately God knew what they would need when they got to a certain point that would be melted down, fashioned, all these things put together. But he starts on the inside with most of it and moves out. And so I want to say to you guys, because this is the truth that keeps hitting me, God's more concerned about our inside than the outside. He wants us to get a thick skin, because sometimes we as Christians, if we're not careful, we can have a real thin skin. If you've stayed here and you keep doing this thing called church, God's developing as you're doing ministry, as you're interacting with people. You start to get a thick skin, but you never want to lose a soft heart. And so, if we were to look at your life, my life, whatever, I don't know if you've ever watched those shows where they have a storage unit. The other day when we were moving some of Tori's stuff from his house, and he's ultimately, going through that whole process of moving, but things aren't necessarily done yet, so we had to put it in a storage unit. And it reminded me, have you ever seen those reality shows where there's people bidding on storage units, and they don't know necessarily what's in there, but at a certain point, they're going to lift the door, and you're going to see inside, and it's like, whoa, I spent such and such an amount of money on that, and this is all I got here. This is what it is. But then there's somebody that there's just something of deep value here. There's something so worthwhile. Let me ask you, in the storage of your life, in the temple of your life, because we as believers, this body is called a temple. If the door was opened, spiritually speaking, what would we see? If we had physically become what we are spiritually, and that's lifted, what would that look like for you? And so much of that is tied to our choices. I choose this, I choose that, I go here, I go there, I think this, I think that. A bunch of our men's retreat was Paul, who spoke last week. hammering home the point of thinking and choices and then actions, and that's how it usually works. And so where am I at with my thoughts? And that leads me to that. And that's what fills the junk drawer of my life, or the storage unit of my life, or the way the Lord uses it, the temple of my life. And so this whole thing, tabernacle, is a picture of Jesus. We'll see that throughout this. Hebrews could be quoted every Sunday because it's the New Testament's way of going, hey, all that stuff that I talked about earlier, that was a picture of this coming king named Jesus. And so this morning, there's a lot of verses here, but we're going to work through them pretty decently quickly. But we're not going to get caught up in the details of such and such an amount of cubits, such and such an amount of this or that. Some of the things, it should grab our attention, and it's good. But it was God's way of saying, I'm doing things decently in order, but I don't want you to be bound by the details. You're checking off boxes. I understand how big this is. I understand. And it doesn't change your life. Because you've met those people. That's the older brother in the prodigal son story. He checked off all the boxes. I stayed around. I did this thing. And the other brother was just a mess. And he comes back, and Dad is so loving and gracious, and he's saying, bring the best robe, put it on my son, the ring, the shoes, kill the fattened calf. We're going to celebrate my son that was dead. He's now alive, and he was lost, and now he's found. And the brother who was always there, checking off boxes. I know my idiot brother is out, but look at me. I do what's right. But his heart wasn't one with the Father. God wants a love relationship between you and him. So let's not get, I love the fact that we could, by a model being put together, we can go, wow, he gave us the parameters of that thing. We could, if we had enough time and money, like they've done with that museum in the Midwest there, the Creation Museum, where they put an ark together. I don't know if there's a place that has a life-size tabernacle, but it could be done because God gave us the blueprints, basically. That's not why he did it. He didn't do that. It's great, but if it doesn't point us to Jesus, it's just a nice exhibit. So let's look at these. Point number 1, putting up the curtains. Let's look at the first few. And as we work through it, I want to kind of stop every now and then and make a point of what he's trying to communicate. Look at this, verse 1. Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle or tent, the word where it says that Jesus became flesh in John 1. The word actually is he tabernacled with us. He nailed down tent pegs, and I'm here. I'm going to be with you. He tabernacled. So, moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen, and blue and purple and scarlet yarns. So he's got this fine linen. The picture there is of just this cleanness. There is a candle that is white linen with Yankee Candle. I don't know if you've ever. And don't you love that? The sheets are washed, they're all clean. You just get in bed after you take a shower, you're not stinky. You get under those, and you just smell that. It's like, oh, clean, all right? The picture there, just clean, pure. And look at these colors. Blue, which represents Jesus' heavenly origin. Purple, his royalty. And scarlet. You see that even in the midst of that, you got to talk sacrifice. You got to talk blood. And isn't it interesting? Purple's right in the middle of blue and red. Come together. Make that color. And this would just be beautiful. And then it says, you shall make them with cherubim skillfully worked into them. This is artistic. It's not just, anybody got the cherubim patch to put on here? It's literally knitted in there. It's crochet. I don't know how they did it. But it's going to be beautiful. And it's in there, and he's got this heavenly origin, and he's got this royal origin, and he's got this sacrifice that he's going to. And then there are these guardian angels, these strong angels, not little cherubs. These are angels, all right? I know I can say angels, only so tough, all right? If we could see physically what is around us spiritually, we would be overwhelmed. We would be overwhelmed on both sides of the deal. And he's saying that these who are the ones who guard the tree of life, these are the ones that represent strength. They're knitted into this tent. Look at that verse 2. The length of each curtain shall be 28 cubits, and the breadth of each curtain 4 cubits. All the curtains shall be the same size. There's a unanimous figure to this. There's this unity to this. Verse 3, 5 curtains shall be coupled to one another, and the other 5 curtains shall be coupled to one another. And you shall make loops of blue on the edge of the outermost curtain in the first set. Likewise, you shall make loops on the edge of the outermost curtain in the second set. 50 loops you shall make on the one curtain, and 50 loops you shall make on the edge of the curtain. That is in the second set. The loops shall be opposite one another, and you shall make 50 clasps of gold, and couple the curtains one to another with the clasps, so that the tabernacle may be a single whole. I mean, do you see the beauty of this and the intricacy and the time it takes, the investment? I've had opportunity the other day. We were at the Warren County Museum. If you haven't had opportunity to do that, sometimes the thing that is nearest to you, you just miss because you're just busy with life. But we've got this thing that we went to, and they had a bunch of quilts set up one time. Yeah, that's nice. But have you ever watched somebody putting a quilt together? It's a beautiful thing to watch. The time, the effort. I was in central Illinois and down in a town called Arthur, or near Arcola, Illinois. The Amish live there. And you go, and just the time and effort put into these beautiful, intricate items. And God is saying, take the time. When you're putting this together, when it comes to an act of worship, take the time to do it well. And that may mean for you and me taking the time when it comes to even our time in the Word or our time for prayer. Verse 7, you shall also make curtains of goat's hair for a tent over the tabernacle. 11 curtains shall you make. The length of each curtain shall be 30 cubits, and the breadth of each curtain 4 cubits. The 11 curtains shall be the same size. You shall couple the 5 curtains by themselves, and 6 curtains by themselves, and the 6th curtain you shall double over at the front of the tent. So there's so much protection involved in this. You shall make 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that is outermost in one set, and 50 loops on the edge of the curtain that is outermost in the second set. You shall make 50 clasps of bronze, and put the clasps into the loops, and couple the tent together that it may be a single whole. God is so much about unity. All these things, it's coming together. We need to constantly, just as elders, we're talking about this, we need to constantly guard the unity of the church. And the extra that remains in the length of the curtain, the cubit on the one side and the cubit on the other side, shall hang over the sides of the tabernacle on this side and on that side to cover it. And you shall make for the tent a covering of tanned ram skins and a covering of goat skins on top. And so we have this covering. And so as I was thinking about that in the picture, there's so many pictures to curtains. I took this from a room downstairs. I'll return it. All right. But all that a curtain represents: protection. My wife in our bedroom, she's got these curtains that just, it just shuts out every bit of light. She wants me to take my pillow. We got a million pillows on the bed. You know how that goes, Take one of those and put it over the clock. Because she loves darkness rather than light. I don't know what that says about her. She's not here, so I'm getting away with this. But curtain. And I thought about, remember I was talking at the beginning of the message about old people and the different phrases they use? One of these is, it's curtains for you. Remember that? It's kind of a gangster term. I remember seeing a Bugs Bunny. I don't know if you guys remember. I know this is so deep spiritually. All right. But there was this, he's dealing with this this gangster, like a, whatever. And he's making his way, and it's Bugs making his way, and then ultimately it's curtains, and you see the guy backing up, and finally he just lays some curtains on him, and that just riveted in my brain. But what the picture is this, it's a dramatic scene, or it's a scene from a play, and that is that once the curtains drop, it's over. And God says to you and me, he says it throughout the word, that at some point, if we don't want to follow him, this could hit us as a nation. And without him, we're heading this direction. There's this phrase, have you ever heard the phrase Ichabod? Ichabod is not just a name from the headless horseman. It is a phrase in the Hebrew which means the glory has departed. And so at some point, if I have no desire and I claim to be a child of his, but there's no interest in things of him, you got to wonder some things. Where am I at? Am I a believer? And he looks at us as his children, and he's constantly desiring to call us home. And so let's be people that when we think of the curtains, we think of heading his direction as a way and looking to him for protection as opposed to not doing that. Point number 2. Actually, let's look at this. Hebrews 6:13 through 20. Hebrews 6:13 through 20. And when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, "Surely I will bless you and multiply you." And thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes an oath is final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. We have this as sure and steadfast anchor of the soul. It sounds like a hymn. A hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And so, what's behind your curtain? Let's keep going. Point number 2, putting up the framework. Look at verse 15. And you shall make upright frames for the tabernacle of acacia wood. 10 cubits shall be the length of a frame, and a cubit and a half the breadth of each frame. There shall be 2 tenons in each frame for fitting together. And so, as you think about these frames, this is wood. This is wood. I asked Matt today, some of these ideas hit me in Sunday morning, and I asked him, could you bring a 2x4? And he said, yeah, do you want a small one or do you want an 8-footer? And I said, 8-footer. But as I was thinking about that, I just think that God has called us to be straight up. He's called us to be someone that we can count on. The times that I go to the lumber yard with my wife, and she's looking at the wood, and any of the times I've been with you guys that know what you're doing, it's just interesting how when you're picking up pieces of wood, you're finding out if it's treated. You're finding out if it's straight, and you look at it and you're, okay, is this the kind that I want? I'm not going to take it because there's something about this wood being straight, and this next word comes to my mind. You ever see that word? That's an old people word. Cattywampus. Look at that wood. It's cattywampus. You know what that means? It's not good. And so it talks about this tenons in the tabernacle, and it's this framing of this, and what happens is these tenons would be this piece of wood is attached to another piece of wood. And so I want Jesus to be the one that I look to. The Bible talks about the fact that he was a root that came out of a parched ground, but he's solid and he's secure, and I'm latching onto him but I hope that I'm somebody that you could stand next to and we're not cattywampus. And if you have one in the midst of that, it has an effect on the structure. And so as he's building this tabernacle, he's getting across the point that I want it to be something that you take so seriously, that your heart's desire would be, I want to be straight up a man or woman of God, because we're building a place of worship with our lives. Our kids are watching us. Our friends are watching us. Our neighbors are watching us. And God, you got to do that work. And so you're the one who whittles me down. You're the one who does whatever you need to do so that it fits the way it ought. It's amazing watching Matt and others that I've seen, these tools that they have, that they carve out things and they work out the situation so things can join with one another, and it just snaps right into, and it's secure. I want that with God. And that may mean, because he doesn't need to change, I need to change. So he may need to do some things to make it so that I fit the way I ought. And you see here just the wisdom in this. Verse 18, you shall make the frames for the tabernacle, 20 frames for the south side, 40 bases of silver you shall make under the 20 frames, 2 bases under one frame for its 2 tenons, and 2 bases under the next frame for its 2 tenons. And for the second side of the tabernacle on the north side, 20 frames, and there 40 bases of silver, 2 bases under one frame, and 2 bases under the next frame. And for the rear of the tabernacle, westward, you shall make 6 frames, and you shall make 2 frames for corners of the tabernacle in the rear. They shall be separate beneath, but joined at the top at the first ring. Thus shall be with both of them. They shall form the 2 corners, and there shall be 8 frames with their bases of silver, 16 bases, 2 bases under one frame, and 2 bases under another frame. You shall make bars of acacia wood, 5 for the frames of the one side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars of the frames on the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the frames of the side of the tabernacle at the rear westward. The middle bar, halfway up the frames, shall run from end to end. You shall overlay the frames with gold, and shall make their rings of gold for holders of the bar, and you shall overlay the bars with gold. Then you shall erect the tabernacle according to the plan for it that you were shown on the mountain. And so this special relationship that Moses has with God, and God showing him what he needs to do. Look at Isaiah 53:2. This is the wood that we hold on to. For he grew up before him like a young plant, and like a root out of a dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him. I'm telling you, from the outward appearance, we would look at that thing and go, that's a really cool tent. The only time it would be of any difference to us is when we got inside, and we'd be like, whoa. And God is saying, quit worrying so much about how you look to other people on the outside. If I'm in you, if I'm changing your heart, if I'm doing a work in you, it's going to come out. It's going to show. And as you get older, don't worry about the plastic surgery so much. Worry about joy. Well, you shouldn't worry about joy. But I'm telling you, you ever meet those older people? They haven't had a bit of surgery, but they are so in love with Jesus Christ. They're just aglow. That's the kind of person I want to be. Last point number 3, putting up the veils. Verse 31. And you shall make a veil, look at these colors again, of blue and purple and scarlet yarns and fine twined linen. It shall be made with cherubim, skillfully worked into it, and you shall hang it on 4 pillars of acacia overlaid with gold, with hooks of gold on 4 bases of silver. And you shall hang the veil from the clasps, and bring the ark of the testimony in there within the veil. And the veil shall separate for you the holy place from the most holy. You shall put the mercy seat on the ark of the testimony, the most holy place, and you shall set the table outside the veil, and the lampstand on the south side of the tabernacle, opposite the table, and you shall put the table on the north side. And verse 36, you shall make a screen for the entrance of the tent of blue and purple and scarlet yarns and fine twined linen, embroidered with needlework. And you shall make for the screen 5 pillars of acacia, and overlay them with gold. Their hooks shall be of gold, and you shall cast 5 bases of bronze for them. What detail. Matthew 27:51 talks about the day that Jesus died. And I don't know if you remember, but this veil was talked about. This veil was about 4 inches thick. There are some Jewish historians that said that if 2 horses, really strong horses, were put on both ends of this, they could not rip it apart. But you know what ripped it apart. And it was the crucifixion of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. He, from top to bottom, the veil was torn in two. You would think that the light would go on. We've done something really bad here. The Holy of Holies is available to us. Hebrews 9:2-9. For a tent was prepared, the first section in which were the lampstand, the table, and the bread of presence. It is called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was a second section called the most holy place, having the golden altar of incense and the ark of the covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden urn holding the manna and Aaron's staff that budded and the tablets of the covenant. Above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. Of these things we cannot now speak in detail. These preparations having thus been made, the priests go regularly into the first section, performing their ritual duties. But into the second, only the high priest goes, and he but once a year. Do you realize the effort that was made for an event that only happened once a year? Wow. The people that would never see some of that stuff in there. And God says, it's not about that. It's what's inside that I'm doing. And not without taking blood, which he offers for himself and for the unintentional sins of the people. By this, the Holy Spirit indicates that the way into the holy places is not yet open as long as the first section is still standing, which is symbolic for the present age. According to this arrangement, gifts and sacrifice are offered that cannot perfect the conscience of the worshiper. And so this picture, this idea of a veil. So I've got the veil here. I got another curtainy type thing. But a veil is different from a curtain in the fact that there's something, you can see through it a little bit. That's why there's a wedding veil. You see just a little bit there, but you're not seeing the whole thing there. The phrase lift the veil is a phrase that is used to communicate the fact that something that was earlier, you're not sure about it, but there's a veil lifted, and you say, oh, that's it. That's the reality of the situation. And so if God is working on the inside, allow him to be the one that's concerned about what others see. You just keep following him. You just keep walking with him. You just keep serving him. He'll take care of the rest. And the door is Jesus. And let me ask you this morning as we're wrapping up here. Revelation talks about Jesus standing at the door and knocking. And it's a verse that many times is used for people that don't know him. But actually it's a verse that's talking to people that do know him. And it's a verse that says, I want so much for this relationship to grow. I want us to go deep. I'm into that. So I stand at the door and I knock. Is there a curtain between us and God? Is there a plank? Is there a veil? I'd encourage you, even today, to take that step to say, God, I've been keeping you out. I've been keeping you out of decisions I'm making. I've been the master of my life, and I'm not really running it the best way, which is your way. In your marriage, in your work, in your school, in your love relationship, however that plays out, following God, following his standards, trusting him. Let me pray for you.